Hello. Good evening. Thank you for having me here. I said to Nikolai and a couple others that I haven't seen Copenhagen in the daylight yet. I got here at night and I was working all day in the office, and when we stepped out to come here, it was dark again. So I have yet to see it in the light, but I'm looking forward to it. Thank you for having me come. It is my privilege and honor to be here. And I consider it a privilege anytime somebody wants to come and hear me and what I have to share with you. So I appreciate you coming. I was sharing with Sina and Nikolai tonight that wherever I go and wherever God calls me to, and when God first called me into this, God asked me where I'd be willing to go. And I said, Lord, I would go to the remotest place on this earth to share with one person, if that's where you wanted to send me. And then my friend Mike told me about a place he had to visit in the Viet Cong, and he had to crawl in these underground tunnels and to get there. And I'm a little bigger than my friend Mike is. He's a little bit, well, I got a good stomach too, but he's even bigger than me. And he said, you can only go one way. You can't go backwards, and you have to inch your way along with your shoulders because it's so tight in there. And God had called him to speak with some Vietnamese people who were out there in these underground tunnels. And I said, well, Lord, I'd like to change my mind. I will go anywhere except for those underground tunnels, because I get a little claustrophobic in that. But it's my privilege to come and be here with you and share the things of Christ and what difference Jesus really does make. And what does that look like on a daily basis? One of the most popular questions I get asked, at least this year, the two most popular questions I got asked over this year of traveling around and sharing this message is one, Chad, what does the normal Christian life look like? What does that look like on a day-to-day basis? When I'm at work, when I'm at home with my kids, when I'm with my spouse, when I'm out with my friends. I mean, what does this look like? And then another question I've been asked quite a bit this year is how do you disciple someone? What does Christian discipleship look like? There are so many Christian books written on discipleship, how to disciple someone. And they're all so different. And they all start at a different place. And where do I start in Christian discipleship? And so those are the two of the most popular questions that I've got asked over this past year. And I want to talk around those things. What is the normal Christian life? Is maybe you're feeling my Christian life is anything but normal. And I have experienced a lot of victory at it all in my life. And where is the victory? And that was one of the questions that I asked. And before I say that, how many of you have been to an Abiding Life conference with my dear friend Ray Andrews? Can you put up your hands? Well, I'm so sorry. I'm sorry. I apologize for Brother Ray ahead of time. And I don't know how you can understand the man. I can't even, he grew up in Ireland and then moved to Australia, so he's got an Irish-Australian accent. It's hard enough trying to understand the Irish and trying to understand the Australians, and he's got them mixed together. I was telling a few of these people, Ray he'll call our house and leave a phone message, and it takes my wife and I 40 minutes to decipher what exactly, I'm not kidding you, 40 minutes. And so I finally called him up one day. I said, brother, can you please talk English? I am speaking English, brother. I am speaking English. I said, brother, that's anything but English. And so anyway, so I promise you, at least you'll be able to understand me and what we're saying over the course of this conference. No, I love my dear brother Ray. And it's been good. It's been good journeying together with him in this message. My older dear brother in the Lord. I want to share with you a little bit about my story. And I thought I want to make some kind of connection. You don't know me from a hole in the ground. And I don't know you very well either. And so I wanted to start off today, and I thought I'd share a little bit about my journey with you so we can have a bit of a connection together and understand where I've come from, what my journey has been like. Now, we were kind of laughing about this today because Nikolai was calling a town 30,000 people. That would be a town for you guys. And 30,000 for me is a very large city. And I grew up in a small village in Manitoba of 500 people. Actually, it grew to 500. It was 400 at the time when I grew up there. So I grew up in a very small village of 400 people in the province of Manitoba in Canada, in a little place called Binscarth, Manitoba, Canada. And God had taken me there. And life was very comfortable for me growing up there. You knew everybody. Right? You walk down the street, you say hi, you knew exactly who that person was, what their name was. Wasn't a lot of traffic going on. No street lights. You can walk everywhere. You can walk from one end of the village to the other end of the village in about 10 minutes. And it wasn't very large at all. And that's the kind of place that God had grew me up in. And as I grew up, life became more and more difficult for me as life went along. Everybody here, everybody in this world is looking for significance. Everybody's looking for security. Everybody's looking for a purpose for their life. And everybody's looking to belong. I just want to belong. We need acceptance. We need to know we're valued. We need to know we have worth. We need to have all these things, and all of us go looking for those things. And I just wanted to fit in as a kid. That was part of my story. And in my life, I have failed. And I have failed miserably. I failed as a son. I have failed as a brother. I've failed as a friend. I've failed as a husband. I've failed as a pastor. And I've failed as a father. In every area of my life, I've experienced failure. And nothing but failure. I was privileged. I've pastored in a local church setting before I went full-time into this ministry. I've been part of Abiding Life Ministries Canada since 2000, and we got our official charitable status in 2004, and I've been doing these conferences since 2003. And in the midst of when I first started out doing these conferences, I was pastoring full-time in a local church. God had me pastoring in 3 different churches over a period of about 12 years. And so in those years of working in the church, in a local church, God had taught me much, and I got to see much. And that was the training ground before He wanted me to go off and start sharing this message with others. And I just went full-time. It's been about a year and a half now, I guess, that I've been full-time in doing this ministry. But before then, I got to serve in a local church. So let me tell you, failure was a common word in my life. I was failing all the time and kept experiencing it and experiencing it. As a son, I was never the son that my mom and dad always wanted. I'd manipulate and lie to get my own way. As a brother, I was always an embarrassment to them, always doing things that embarrassed them, and they didn't like me very much. As a friend, I've been called disloyal. You're never there when I need you. You're always gone. And when I need you, you're never there. As a husband, well, I've manipulated, lied, almost cheated on my wife, even while I was a pastor. Almost. And as a pastor, I just couldn't seem to do and help and be where everybody wanted me to be and what everybody wanted me to do. And then as a dad, well, I'm just never around enough for them. You're never here. All these relationships that I've tried so hard to please and do well by them, I've failed and failed miserably. Now, anybody still want to listen? Want to listen to a failure? Man, what does this guy have to offer then? I grew up in this little church. I don't know, we have all kinds of different denominations in North America, and I'm not sure how that works here in Denmark. Probably the same, I would imagine. And my parents grew up in they brought us to a Brethren church, which was, they call it a closed circle. And it was a very, if I could use the word, legalistic church. And so they took things in the Bible very literally. They never took culture into context and the day and age and what some of those things mean in the Bible. And so when in our church, in that church growing up, the women couldn't speak. The women had to be silent. It was wonderful service. No, I'm just kidding. No, the women couldn't speak. They had to be silent because of that one scripture that they take on that. My mom, we used to call it a doily on her head, but they had to wear a head covering. And we used to bug Mom and always ask her, where's your potted plant to fit on top of that doily? And then if you weren't a brethren, then you couldn't be part of the inner circle. They had the chairs set up in a square, and then and if you weren't a brethren, they had chairs on the outside. And so someone who wasn't a brethren always felt like they were never on the in. They were on the outside. And when they passed the communion cup around, it was a very strong wine. I remember as a 12-year-old kid having troubles drinking that down. And you'd always try to get the cup before all the old ladies got it with their lipstick and drool left on the side of it because you just shared one cup. That was always that got me in the attitude for prayer all the time. And in this church, I wanted to play my guitar one day. And it was just a big fight to get a piano in the church so a piano could be played and used in the worship on the Sunday morning services. And so we got my guitar, and then finally all the brothers got together and said, okay, we'll give it a try. So I brought my guitar and was leading worship one Sunday, and it created just a big turmoil, a huge turmoil, and created a church split over that. So I thought, well, that's really wonderful. As a 12-year-old boy, I caused the church to split. I'm having a great start to my life already. And so the church split. My parents got us out of there, and I don't know if you guys, I think it was the Billy Graham Evangelistic Association. You guys have all heard of Billy Graham, right? And they put out these end times movies. Do you guys remember those? Did you get them over here? They had these end times movies. One was called Image of the Beast, and one was called Thief in the Night. One was called Distant Thunder. Well, anyways, they're all about the end times. And I remember watching those as a kid. And of course, it talks about if you don't give your life to Jesus, and if you hopefully you genuinely gave your life to Jesus, or else you might get killed. The rapture will occur, and you won't be coming with the rapture. You're going to have to go through the tribulation here on earth, which in the Bible explains it's hellish. And so I remember I came home one day from school, and I go home, and I was about maybe 13 years old at the time. And I just watched these movies on people who never gave their lives to the Lord, and so they had to stay in the years of tribulation, but all the Christians got raptured up into heaven, got taken up into heaven. So I come home from school one day, and nobody's home. Now, I have a mom and dad, I have 2 older brothers and a younger sister. And I'm just above my sister. And I come home and nobody's there. And normally everybody leaves notes saying where we are. So I come home and nobody's home. And I just finished watching these end times films just the week before. You know, my parents took us. They're more like horror movies to me. And I come home and nobody's there. And I thought, oh no. They've been raptured and I got left. I knew it. I knew it. Lord, I've been trying my best to live for you. I've been doing everything in my possible power to live for you. I can't. So then I called up the head elder of the Brethren Church. I thought, well, he must be going. He's the head elder. I called their house. No answer. I thought, oh no, it really did happen. So then I called my grandma. I knew she was a godly woman. She's been following the Lord her whole life. I said, well, if I can get a hold of her, I know it hasn't happened for sure. Do you think she was home? No. I thought, oh no, the rapture really did occur. And I sat there in the fetal position on the floor weeping and weeping and weeping. And then about 10 minutes later, Mom and Dad come through the doors. I wiped my tears away. What's going on? Nothing? Why didn't you leave a note? Now, why was I so scared? What does it mean to ask Christ into my life? And what does that look like? Holes are starting to show up in my belief system already, even as a young kid. I had asked Jesus into my heart when I was 7 years old, when I was just 7. But I didn't know what all it meant. And my belief system was starting to form. But all kinds of holes were getting poked in that belief system as I walked along. And I started wondering, what is happening here? What is this Christianity? I just wanted to be accepted. I just wanted people to accept me. I wanted to belong. I wanted to try and get through life without being noticed, but just fitting in. And I remember I would do all sorts of things in my life just so I could be accepted. I remember as a kid, I wanted to be cool, and I wanted all the women to like me. The good-looking young man I am. And I remember driving down our one paved road in the village, hoping that a girl would come by. And then I saw 2 girls ahead of me, and they were in my class at school. So I thought, you know what? I'm going to ride my bike with no hands just to impress them. So I start riding back. That's really impressive, right? So I start riding with no hands. And then the worst thing happens ever. My chain falls off on my bike. My bike goes sideways. I hit my head on the side of the paved road. I black out. And they said I was out, these 2 girls, they said I was out for at least a minute and a half. They were getting all concerned. And I wake up to these 2 girls trying their hardest not to laugh, hoping I'm okay. And I wake up to this. I said, oh, no, you can't believe it. I just got up on my bike and I left. I was so embarrassed. I thought, and these things continue and continue and continue and continue to happen in my life. All kinds of these things. And so after a while, I said, this Christianity stuff, there's no power in this. It's been a lot of hard work. Where's God in all this? I don't feel accepted. I don't feel like I belong. Where do I fit? What difference is Jesus supposed to make? And so I said, my mom and dad, my dad married my mom. My dad wasn't a Christian when he married my mom. And my dad met the Lord when I was 6 years old, and then my dad led me to the Lord when I was 7. And during that time, it was really hellish because somebody gave my dad, a counselor gave my dad the counsel to tell my mother everything that he did before he came to Christ. And that just wasn't the best thing to do. And it created all kinds of hell in my parents' lives and in our home. Yelling, arguing, things being thrown at each other, things getting broken. My sister hiding under her bed or wrapped up in the fetal position in a room in a corner crying. My brothers would take off because they're older, and so I'm left there trying to comfort her. And yet I'm standing there wondering who's going to comfort me in all this. And it was just hell. And I thought, well, Lord, if this is what you're like, if this is what a life with you is like, then I'm done with it. Forget it. And so I entered into the party world with all my friends. I started drinking when I was in grade 9, and that continued for a few years. And got into drugs. Of course, in North America, it seems like the typical story. The Christian who got drunk, became an addict, did all these things, and then he met the Lord. Well, I don't want to be a statistic, but it's my story. And I did all those things trying to find life, trying to find acceptance, trying to find significance, security, hope. Not a hope of uncertainty, but a hope of certainty. And I did all those things through that. Then I remember the police caught me. We had open liquor in our vehicle. And the policeman who happened to be there was one of the elders at the Brethren Church. So I remember he took me outside, out of the car. My friends got to go with the other cop, and he took me around this dark alley, had his hand on his billy stick, and I'm getting really nervous. And he says, Chad, what are you doing? His kids just loved me. I would babysit for his kids quite often. And I remember just seeing that tear in his eye, but also anger at the same time, saying, what are you doing? And that was a wake-up call for me. I realized that was coming. That was grade 10, and I started to realize what is my life coming to. And then in grade 11, I remember waking up one day and saying, I'm more miserable than I was before. I'm more miserable without God than I was with Him. And the thing was, I couldn't get God out of my mind and out of my heart. The more I drank, that He'd still be there. And I remember witnessing to people when I'd be drunk. Now, how does that work? Chad, you go to church, don't you? You're a Christian. Yeah. Well, tell me about Jesus. Okay. How does that work? My life and my words never lined up. But my life didn't line up with how I thought God should be. And this continued on for a while until one day I just said, I'm miserable. I'm more miserable than I was before. So I decided to get my life together. God provided an opportunity for me to go to a Christian high school. My last year of high school, my grade 12 year, I went to a high school in Saskatchewan. Now, Saskatchewan is the flattest province in the country. I was just telling the people who I drove in with here today that in Saskatchewan, if you lose your dog, you can still see him 3 days later. It's that flat. You can see forever there. And so God sent me to this barren place. And it was a good opportunity for me because I knew something needed to change in my life. Now, here's the real miracle. My parents went bankrupt. My dad was not good with his money at all. And so they had no money whatsoever. And they went bankrupt. And so I was wondering how I was going to get there. And I remember praying for the first time. I went and met with my pastor at the time and his wife. And they prayed with us. And then the idea came, go talk to your grandma. She's got some money. And that was on somebody's Lord. And that really witnessed to me. And I thought, well, I'll go ask, I guess. And so right after we prayed, I called my grandma up, and she had a lunch free. And so I went over there. And she was glad to provide the way for me to get there. And that was a real blessing from the Lord for me. And so I got there, and I thought life is going to get better and better. And I got my first girlfriend in grade 12. Finally, somebody noticed I'm a good-looking man. And so I got my girlfriend there, and then after a few months later, she broke up with me, and all that kind of sucked. And life continued on in this pattern. And I got another girlfriend. And then she broke up with me too. And I thought, there must be something wrong with me. What is wrong with me? What is going on here, Lord? Where are you in all this? So then I know every good Christian man has a Christian wife. So I decide to get married. And before I do that, I go into pastoral ministry, thinking, wow, well, if I make pastoral ministry, then God must accept me. I must be accepted. I must belong somewhere. And so God paves the way, and I became a pastor when I was 20 years of age. Yeah, I was 20 years old at the time when I first started pastoring. Pretty young, hey? And so somebody obviously saw something I never. And so they hired me on. What a risk. What a risk. Taking on a guy at 20 years of age. So I started pastoring. And then I got married. And then I started pastoring about 2 weeks after we got married. And I thought, wow. Now, I said to all my friends who've been married for at least 5-10 years, I said, you guys forgot to tell me a little piece of advice before I got into marriage. You never told me that when I ask my wife to do something, she doesn't always do it. I'm king of my kingdom. And she's supposed to listen to me, isn't she? I said, where were you? I thought you were my friends. This was going to help solve everything. Well, you get married. This is going to be good. When I say jump, she's supposed to say how high. Didn't she know I'm the king of this kingdom? And then we have kids. And now I have all these unruly subjects in my kingdom. They don't listen to me either. And I thought, what's going on? Nothing is working. And I'm looking and looking and looking and looking and looking. I just can't get anything right. Remember my wife and I sitting in a Tim Hortons is a donut coffee shop that's really big in Canada. I remember standing there in this parking lot, my wife and I yelling at each other at the top of our lungs, everybody looking around, and I'm thinking, oh yeah, marriage really did it for me. It really fixed it, didn't it? And I'm just saying, Lord, I can't get anything right. And then I went into pastoral ministry. Oh boy, those poor people. Well, I'm going to help fix their problems. You know, I would sit in my chair sometimes in my office as a pastor, and I'd just start laughing some days. That God, what am I doing here? What do you have me here for? These people are coming to me with their problems, and yet I got my own. What do I have to say to them? What do you have me here for? When I went to my second church, I was about four years, it was into my 4th year of pastoring. I finally said, I was there maybe about 3 or 4 months. And I went to the pastor and I said, you know what? I'm done. I'm absolutely done. There's no power in this gospel message, this gospel of Jesus. There's no power in it. The Bible says it's the power of the gospel unto salvation for those who will believe. I said, there's no power in it. It's a lot of hard work. You know, it was such hard work for me that in my 3rd and 4th years of Bible college, when I went to Bible college, or as we say in Canada, bridal college, go and find your bride there. In my 3rd and 4th year of Bible college, I would go home at the breaks and I'd go out drinking and smoking just to take the edge off of my Christianity. Christianity drove me to drink. It drove me to drink just to take the edge off. It was hard work. And I said to that pastor in my 4th year, there is no power in this gospel. It is nothing but hard work with little reward. I said, I think I'm missing something. I must be missing something. You know, I was so desperate, there was a guy by the name of Rich Mullins, who's a worship leader out of the States. And they called him the shoeless man because he kept giving his shoes away to the Navajo Indians. And I said, maybe I need to give my shoes away. Maybe that's what I'm missing. Maybe I just need to give stuff away. Maybe that'll help. I was so desperate when I was talking to the pastor. And then the pastor finally asked me, he said, well, what are you missing? I said, well, that's what I'm asking. I must be missing something. Well, what are you missing, Chad? I said, I don't know. He says, are you not complete in Christ? Wow. That's what it says. I guess so. Well, does it say it or doesn't it? Well, yeah, that's what it says. It says we're complete in Christ. Well, if you're complete, what are you missing? And then he left. He had to go away on a trip for that weekend. And him and his wife, they took my wife because our parents lived back where they were going, her parents. So I was on my own that whole weekend. And we had this little loft up in our little rancher apartment. And I go up there and I laid myself bare before the Lord, saying, God, where is this completeness? Where is it? Because I'm not experiencing it. I'm supposed to be complete in you, but I feel so incomplete. I'm supposed to be fulfilled in you, but I'm so unfulfilled. I'm supposed to be content, but I have no content. You say it's a life of peace, but I have nothing but problems. You say it's a life of calm, but I experience nothing but conflict. Where are you? And God allowed me to lay there for that entire weekend. I sat up in that loft and I wasn't going to leave until he gave me a blessing or gave me a word or something. The next week, we had a Sunday evening teaching time. And there was some teacher, speaker, up on a whiteboard. And he drew a picture of a house. Here, I can just show you. He drew a picture of a house, and it kind of went like this. I'm in my loft. It's the next week. There's somebody doing a teaching in the evening, and they draw something like this. Sorry, I don't have it. That's my problem. Okay. The Lord is teaching me a lesson in humility. All right, there we are. Okay. And he draws this house, and it goes like this. And he has different things written in here. And on the bottom, he has this foundation. Now, I don't normally share this story, and I've never done this anywhere before, actually, but I don't know why I'm doing it today, except I feel led to. Now, I don't live in the big and spectacular, and God normally doesn't speak to me in dreams, but there's only been 2 times in my life where he did. And because he needed to get my attention, because I was so weak, and I was hanging on a thread of faith. So when I was in Bible college, I couldn't sleep for a week. And I wake up and I feel like somebody's choking me. My chest was heavy, and I feel like, and I just wake up, it was freaking my roommate right out. It's like, what's going on with you? And I had a friend give me this necklace, this medallion thing. And I didn't know what it was, except it was really cool. It looked really cool. And I'm not, there's a demon under every rock kind of guy. I'm not that kind of guy. But the symbol on that neck chain that he gave me went like this. Do you guys know what that is? I didn't know what it was back then. I had no clue. And for a week I couldn't sleep. And so I went over to my dean's house, the guy who's in charge of our dorm. And I was dropping off some Keith Green CDs that he wanted me to listen to. He thought, oh, you really need to hear this guy. You guys heard of Keith Green? Yeah? Yeah. And he said, you need to listen, guy. And I mean, I remember listening to his tapes and thought, wow, this guy has passion. I wish he could, share some with me. And he saw that thing on my neck chain when I went over to drop off the Keith Green tapes, and he ripped it right off of my neck. And I said, that's not mine. He says, I don't care. And he threw it in his garbage right in front of me. He said, do you know what that is? I said, no, but it's cool. He says, Chad, that's the yin and the yang. That's Taoism. You know what they teach. And of course, he went into the whole thing, and we'll be talking about that later on in the conference. And I tell you, that night, for whatever reason, I'm not saying there's a demon in the necklace, but I tell you, it was real. My chest was heavy every night I woke up, and there was somebody choking me, and I couldn't breathe. And my roommate's like, man, you got to go get yourself checked out. I'm like, man, I don't know what it is. And the night he ripped that off, that night I slept like a baby, finally. And I don't know. I slept like a baby. You know what it is, brother? I'm going to have to reset that tomorrow. I totally slept like a baby. And that night God gave me a dream. And his hand reached down from heaven, and it wrote on a stone tablet. And it said, wait for your foundation before you build your house. Now, I grew up in a very, very poor home. And my parents didn't have much. They didn't have a lot. And so, because of that, where was I? Sorry, I was kind of focusing on that. I cannot do I'm not a multitasker. My wife's the multitasker in our home. Anyways, let me get back to the story. So I slept like a baby. God writes that down. Yeah, I grew up in a very poor home. And so I thought, wow, wait for your foundation before you build your house. Excellent. God's going to give me a home. I just have to wait for the foundation. Don't put it on a faulty foundation. Excellent. This is wonderful news. And I thought like that, just like Nicodemus. Nicodemus, you have to be born again. What does he think? How am I going to crawl back into my mother's womb? You're a little sick, Jesus. How do I do that? Right? We think physical all the time. I did the same thing. I'm going to get a house. I'm going to get a home. And as this pastor was doing this teaching, this is years later, by the way. This is years later. He writes this word. Foundation. And beside that word, he put this word. And God reminded me right in that moment. Here's what I meant. Wait for your foundation before you build your house. Because if you don't have this right, this is going to crumble. And he was showing me my way of living, my belief system had all kinds of cracks in it. So my foundation wasn't weighing up. And he began to teach me about what it means to have Jesus in your life. Christ in you, your only hope of glory. And for those next 2 years, it was hell for my wife and I. We went through it at the same time. When Paul met Christ, 7 years were taken out to rethink his whole theology, his whole way about thinking about God and life. For me, it was the next 4 years of intense God taking me and unlearning. I had to unlearn all these things that were learned. And I had to unteach everything that had been taught so I can hear. Because here's what happens. The wrong thing is said for so long that when you hear the right thing, it sounds wrong. Has anybody ever experienced that? Yeah, the wrong thing's been said for so long that when I hear the right thing, it sounds wrong. And so God wanted to take me and rethink all of this way about God and life. And so the journey began. And for the next about 2.5 years, there was a lot of tears in our home, a lot of joys, but a lot of working through. And God was faithful and started to teach me what this meant. Christ in you, your only hope of glory. When I was in my 9th year of pastoral ministry, I burnt out. I totally burnt out. I couldn't even branch a thought in my mind. I couldn't even think what I thought the last moment. My wife would ask me a question, and I just stared her blankly. She'd say, Chad? I said, what? She goes, well, what's your answer? I said, you asked me something? I mean, I was done. I was absolutely done. God let me come to the very, very, very end of myself. I had pimples all over my body. Doctors couldn't figure out. My heart was shooting off like a machine gun just in a moment, and then it just started going. Doctors would check me out. Well, your heart's fine. I don't know where these pimples are. Nobody could figure it out. It was just a mystery. And then God brought me to a place where the speaker was speaking, and he titled his message, Dead Leader Running. And he explained every symptom and everything that I had in my life. And God was showing me that your work doesn't work. Only my work does. When I was on the cross, Chad, I didn't say to be continued. I said it is finished. I've done the work. I came not to show you what you could do, but what you couldn't do. but only I could do in through you. You see, it's funny. We read our Bibles, which is over there. We read our Bibles, and we read the Old Testament, and we read of God's law, do we not? We read about God's law. Who could measure up to God's law in the Old Testament? Nobody could. So then the Gospels come, and that really screws Christians up, because they think they can do what he did. They read the Gospels, they make a list, and now they try to do what he did, because they think Jesus came to show them what they could do. But he never came to show us what we could do. He came to show us what we couldn't do, what only he could do. And that's why I love the Acts and the epistles, because it shows us what God can do through us, what we could never do. See, the Gospels are the transition books between the Old Testament and the epistles. God's showing you, hear what I had to come do because you never could. That's why I came. So my life can come into you and work its way out of you. But that took a long journey for me to get there. And I want to explain that to you today. One, so you can get to know me a little bit. But two, to give you a sense of what happened, what God had to bring me through in order to come to this place of revelation in my life. Now, people will look at me now and it's really funny. Wow, you're traveling around the world, seeing all these places, doing these wonderful things, sharing a message for the Lord. Boy, you must be something special. Oh, thank you. But here's the mystery, here's the secret. They don't realize God has me do all this because of what keeps me near to him. It's not because I'm so great. It's because he's so great. It's because I'm so weak. After 12 years of pastoral ministry, I took a year off and I went and worked in the oil field industry. Talk about the extremes of life. And I thought, for once and for all, I can show God I can really do this. I can really live for him. It was after 10 years, of pastoral ministry. I took my sabbatical. And so I thought, wow, see, I don't need ministry. I don't need to be a pastor to live for you. I'm going to go into the real world and show you that I can live for you. Well, God had other plans. I didn't do so well there. Started going out drinking with the guys. Picked up smoking again. But here's the neat thing. Those guys saw the flesh of Chad, but they also saw the Spirit of Christ in Chad. Every one of those guys I got to work with came to me for counsel. They started coming to church with me. Some of them got their lives back on track, and I thought, Lord, you have a sense of humor. And one thing I love about the Lord is God knows my flesh. He knows the worst of my flesh, and yet still came and chose to dwell in it. Isn't that something? You know, it wasn't nails that held him to the cross. It was love. I refuse to believe it was nails that held him there. It was love. Love held him there because he loves you and I that deep, that much. And God's come for each one of us here today. You're not here by accident. Everywhere I go, God always draws out the ones who he wants here, who he wants to be here. And every one of you is here because God has called you here for such a time as this. Because he has a message for each one of you. Each one of you has a message and messages, something that he wants you to hear today. Something that he wants me to hear today. I'm not a great man. I'm a weak man. I'm one of the biggest cream puffs you'll ever meet. I can't do this life. I just couldn't do it. I'm a weak, weak man. I failed miserably. And I failed a lot. But here's one thing that I've recognized and realized. That my flesh was never meant to work. God didn't want me to fix my flesh. He just wanted me to live in his Spirit, the life that's already perfected. And so you're listening to a failure here today, but a saved failure. Anybody here have a doctrine of failure? Isn't it funny? We have doctrines for everything in the church. Everything. I remember asking this at one church. And like you, they all started laughing. And laughing hard. I said, what? We have doctrines for everything else. Why don't we have a doctrine of failure? And they said, why? Why do we need a doctrine of failure? Well, there's one big reason. Because we all fail. We all fall short. We've all screwed up. We've all messed up. So we need a doctrine of failure. What do we learn about Peter that we didn't learn from Judas, who killed himself? See, Peter denied Jesus 3 times. He messed up. Judas messed up, and he's killed himself. So what do we learn from Peter that we never learned from Judas? Well, what we learn from Peter is this, that when you're prepared for failure when it comes, and it will come, you don't have to enter into self-condemnation, guilt, bitterness, resentment, because you're prepared for it, because it's going to come, because we need the contrast. And we're going to talk a little bit about that probably on Sunday, a little bit more about that thing of contrast. All right, you with me? You still want to hear from this man? All right. You don't want to hear from the man. You want to hear from the Christ in the man above the man. And that's what we're going to do. Now, do you need a break right now?